What a great afternoon to be doing yet another Wholesome Show. I think this is episode 9,006,000. Is that right?
I'm not a counter.
You're not a counter. That's true. You're more a qualitative person.
Look, I've got a secret count in there, but I don't like displaying my numbers. It's
That's a euphemism if ever I've heard
yeah.
one. So you listen to the Wholesome Show where every week we sit down and have a beer with someone interesting, sometimes twice a week, but we don't always record the second one.
Well, it's
We're
okay.
just like-
It's
we're
okay to
like-
have beers with
yeah.
interesting people that are not podcasting.
That aren't recorded. I
Did you
find
know?
that weird. I find that weird. I'm the sort of dodgy Dr. Rod Lamberts, and at the other side of the microphone is the
Will Grant.
Will Grant.
Will Grant.
Not Will Grant, the Will Grant.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
changing it. One day you're just going to be the.
I'm
Be like
not.
Prince, only
That's
different.
not the direction I'm going, but anyway.
I can push you there. So, Will, question time, as
Okay.
it often is.
Okay.
What colour is salty?
It's a whitey pink.
Whitey pink. What
And
does
sort of-
green sound like?
What does green sound like
Yeah.
is it's got a little fluttery sort of sound.
Like a tiny butterfly. A moth annoying you.
No, softer. Not a moth annoying me, but it's a softer sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like it's got the feeling of lying down in grass and trees fluttering over you, but with a little bit of fart.
Green has a little bit of fart?
Green definitely has a little bit of fart. in
So
there.
green sounds flutter, flutter. Is that what you're saying?
Probably something like that. That's my feeling of what green sounds like.
So do you reckon, is this a stable condition or something that you just made up on the spot?
I made it up on the spot.
So if I asked you tomorrow, you'd forget this conversation, come up with something entirely different.
Guaranteed. Please ask me tomorrow. I've forgotten it already, and green will sound like hard things and
Look, I suspect,
symbols.
I'm not an expert, but I suspect you don't have synesthesia.
have not been diagnosed, so therefore probably not.
Look, I can't be sure, but you know what happened? I bumped into this person on the way over here and/or heard her speak a number of times before about synesthesia and other such things. So luckily we have a guest today, Dr Stephanie Goodhew, who is a senior lecturer, a future fellow, so she's from the future, I think that means, at the Research School of Psychology at Australian National University. Hello, Stephanie.
Hi there.
Have I misrepresented you as a synesthesia person?
No, you have not.
Because I think it's fascinating. Like, the moment I heard you first talk about it, I thought, I just need to know more. And so, what is it? And how do you say it properly?
And this is not on the test. Just what does it mean to you?
So synesthesia is the condition. So we don't call it a disorder or a disease. It doesn't fall into those categories. It's more something that we'd consider an atypical experience, but that doesn't make it negative.
Right.
So
Like
it's
enjoying Fox News or something. Like it's similar.
Or a rare hair colour.
A rare haircut.
yeah, maybe more along the lines of that. So it's sort of embracing that diversity. So these individuals have an unusual sensory experience in that a particular sensation will trigger another concurrent sensory experience that most individuals don't have. So this might be hearing the musical note F sharp will elicit the experience of the colour purple, for
Really?
example.
That's
Yeah.
specific.
Yes.
Not F like I was going to say
So
F flat. but
F
there isn't
neutral
one.
will have
G.
a different colour associated with it.
And people who, for example, hear F sharp as a purple colour, C will also have a colour. Is it as like clearly predictable as that?
Yes, so typically if you hear musical notes, you'll have one for most, if not all, musical notes.
So a chord just looks like a cacophony or like.
But it'd be a cacophony of the warm colours. Like it's a bunch of warm colours or a bunch of or something like that. Like it's not a cacophony. It'd be a combination of things. Not
What
just
is
random.
it? I mean, you would know. Do they, like if someone hears a chord then who sees colour related to notes?
Yeah, so generally it can be a mixing of the individual notes, or particular melodies can also then take on their own unique colours.
Where do they see those colours? So I'm imagining a concert hall and someone has strummed their guitar, hit the piano or something like that. Do they see the colours coming out of the piano, or is it more just they sort of see them in their brain?
That's a great question. And
Thank you.
About time. 67 episodes and finally a good question.
It seems that there's really two distinct types of synesthetes, and they give different answers to that question. So the majority of synesthetes are associator synesthetes, so they'd see it more like in their mind's eye, as you were describing. So a little bit more like if we were asked to imagine green grass, it's more similar to that sort of experience. But a really small subset are projector synesthetes, and they do report seeing the colour out there in front of them, so it'd be like floating out in space.
So cool.
Oh, wow.
Projector synesthetes.
Yeah, like it sounds awesome, but do they describe it as awesome? Or at least
Or
not
they-
horrible?
Yeah, most synesthetes are actually very positive about their experience. So if we
Yeah.
said to them, would you rather have the experience or not have the experience, they definitely would want to have the experience.
They'd rather keep it.
Yes.
So people don't come in going, you got to help me, doc. I've got to get rid of this.
So
No,
what
we
other
don't do
types
that.
of synesthetes or synesthesias are there? So
Synesthesias.
so what we've spoken about is people hearing a colour and seeing hearing a sound and hearing a colour associated with that. What other types are there? Because I've heard there's a few, aren't there?
Yes, there's almost every possible combination that you can consider.
Damn.
So some of the more common types are what we call grapheme colour, so anything to do with language. So weekdays is very common to have colours and a particular spatial arrangement for the week.
So we're starting from the beginning of the week is very brown and crappy. gets to sunny and rainbows on Saturday or something.
It could be something like that,
Like
yeah.
Monday's always top left and Friday's middle right and that sort of thing as well, the field of vision, that kind of
Yes,
thing.
yeah.
Damn. I didn't know that. I had some suspicions of other things, but that's remarkably specific.
Is that an experience you have? Or?
No, but I got to admit, but this sounded like one of these dumb things to say. Like, I wish I did, but then I reckon I could go, oh shit, now I do. Maybe I'd be less happy.
But hang on, I want to know some more. So that's time has a colour associated. What other mix-ups are there?
So sound colour is a
Yeah.
common one, and those individuals are often involved in creative pursuits, like they might be musicians or artists, and they use those sorts of pairings in
Yep.
particular ways.
Any famous ones like that? Famous musos who are also synesthetics?
Well, actually, do you know the artwork that's out there on Childers Street, like the colourful sort of the different coloured panes that
I was looking at that 5 minutes ago,
So, yeah.
and I was actually thinking of synesthesia when I saw it because I was writing towards
it's
this
based
podcast.
on a synesthetics experience.
Oh my god! I must be like telekinesis or something
Yes,
like
you are
that.
telekinetic.
I can move
Because
things
of
with
that
my mind.
experience, you can fly.
So
So there's been artworks created as a result
Yes,
of the responses
there's
to
an
this.
artist, his name escapes me now, but his whole paintings is
Let's
he
call him
listens.
Keith.
Okay, we'll call the artist Keith.
Keith the artist.
Keith listens to these, he'll listen to a symphony, for example, and he'll just paint the colours
Yeah.
that he sees, and that's, his artwork. So
kind
just
of cheating, isn't it? Like it's just sort of plagiarism. But you've got a special technique for plagiarism.
Well, I know that anyway. That's the Blue Danube waltz, you bastard. Strauss! That's Strauss!
All right, I'm mashing up in my mind. I've got taste. Do you see a taste, or you experience colour for a taste?
Yes,
or a
and other
sound?
things
Every
can
time you're
elicit
eating honey,
tastes. So for someone, it might be, a touch on the left elbow might elicit a salty taste in their
that's
mouth.
your salty elbow,
Oh, yeah.
and that's your savoury
sweet
elbow.
elbow.
And so you dip one in your soup. You're like, I need a little bit
But
salty.
is it always like generic, what is it, sweet, salt, savoury, sour, umami, chicken?
No, way more specific. It's
Or is it
literally
like
down.
that tastes like oysters?
Yeah, so it can be very specific like that as well. So it doesn't just have to be generic, sweet and salty.
So there's like as many combinations as you can imagine?
Yes, so the sort of the more unusual ones are rarer. So the visual, auditory ones tend to be the more common. But yes,
Right.
there's definitely all of the wonderful varieties out
Now,
there.
Stephanie, the world is not perfect, but
How dare you?
Sadly.
was a lot less perfect in years past. 50
The
years
80s.
ago, 100 years ago, synesthetes in history. I assume a lot of people just said, "Yeah, bullshit." Just stop saying that your elbow can taste salt. Like,
I don't understand how I feel these
Yeah.
put
colours.
you to death. Put you to death.
Witchcraft.
How did people start accepting that synesthesia is a thing? Because us normies can't do it, so therefore it must be devilry.
Yes, I imagine that synesthetes would have faced a lot of stigma, backlash, or misunderstanding over many years. The first scientific reports of synesthesia were actually in the 1800s,
Okay.
but it didn't become a popular topic of research. I think for exactly the reason that nobody at the time could really scientifically verify that these were genuine experiences. So people were reporting all these really rich and vivid and wonderful experiences, but it was sort of, are these real? Are these genuine? Without a way to verify that, it was kind of sort of.
So how did we come to
We were still
verify?
bleeding people for their sicknesses and closing the windows so you can get the
I've bled the patient. I can't see any extra colours there, so obviously fake.
I think
put
they're
a
seeing
sl-
anything anymore.
I put a slug on his eyeball.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised they didn't know what to do, because they didn't know what to do about a lot of stuff.
Yeah, so this was sort of a little bit in the too hard basket.
Yeah.
And it was only sort of in the late 20th century, with the advent of new technologies in cognitive psychology and cognitive neuroscience, that they could start to verify some of these experiences as, influencing behaviour in really automatic and involuntary ways. And also even the structural brains are different for synesthetes.
Okay, that was
versus
one of my two immediate
non-synesthetes.
questions. So there are structural differences that are identifiable
Yes.
and consistently relate to synesthetics.
Yes, at least
Synesthetists.
on average, synesthetes' brains are noticeably different to non-synesthetes' brains.
In cool ways, like a really obscure area with a polyphonic, polysyllabic Latin name, or something you can actually describe.
It spells it like their brain pattern spells out synesthete. It's just,
If only the brain was so clear. Make our lives as scientists a bit simpler. It really it's quite simple, really, to do with the diffuseness and the generality of the connections in the brain. So a synesthete's brain are just connected between more different and divergent areas that aren't connected in a non-synesthete's
so they're
brain,
better
or
than
have
us.
fewer
They have
connections.
more.
Yeah, if you like to think of it like that.
I knew it. So do you get situations where people come to you, turn up with synesthesia at a point where it's too hard, it's actually disabling? Is that common?
No, it's vanishingly rare, actually. Most synesthetes are, as I said, very happy with their experience. They often use it in creative or artistic ways, or they just say that this is something that's really intrinsic to who they are, and they wouldn't do without it for the world.
does it onset for them, like, do they have it from birth? Or onset at puberty? Sorry, VA.
You camera bashing bastard.
Yes, so synesthetes report having the experience for as long as they can remember, so we think that it's there from birth.
It's not like you got hit on the head and you woke
And then
up and
suddenly
you
one day-
But then,
turn into a
that makes
synesthete.
it in some ways harder to detect as well. So, because if they're a baby and they've always seen Strauss's as a purpley sort of cloud,
Yeah.
then it's going to be hard for them to say, "Oh, I didn't realise everyone didn't see."
Yeah, you wouldn't know it was
like
an
that. Whereas
unusual
you get
experience,
hit
yeah.
on a head, and all of a sudden you
It
see,
changes,
You're like,
yeah.
I noticed something different.
And it's surprising how many people are in adulthood, for example, that hear about synesthesia for the first time, and if they're a synesthete, their reaction can often be, this is a thing, like this is not something that everybody experiences, that they've just taken for granted that this is something that everybody has.
What's your favourite? If you could pick one, I'm assuming you're not. Maybe you are. Are you a synesthecist?
A synesthete. I don't consider myself a synesthete. I have some...
You don't identify as a synesthete.
Yeah, I
It's
don't
not a
think I have
binary,
the-
man. We've moved off a binary
Binary.
world. Stop being so, this or.
I'm old and old-fashioned.
Because synesthetes have such rich perceptual experiences. I sort of have a general structure for the days of the week, and they have particular colours, but it's not an incredibly sort of vivid reaction that's elicited in response to just hearing or reading the name. It's more something I can use in planning and that sort of thing. So that's why I don't say that I'm a synesthete, because I don't think I have quite the same richness.
So
of
like
experience
in
that
the
they have.
X-Men sort of thing, like you're the junior level of
What's X-Men?
superhero, not the top fleet superhero. They get the really defined powers.
Yeah, okay.
Is that incredibly rude to think about these things as powers?
I'm ashamed of you.
You've been waiting your whole life to be ashamed of
I didn't
me.
think it could happen. You're supposed to be the good cop, man.
I don't know, but
I
if
like the concept of neurodiversity, and there is just so much
Yeah.
diversity on so many variables, and this
Yeah.
is just one way that individuals can really differ.
yeah.
It just sounds. I mean, it does sound cool. I can't
I think
help
it's
it.
pretty cool.
You know, I'm a dude who hasn't been, in his youth, obviously not anymore, against certain mind-altering substances and so forth. So the idea that you just come front-loaded doesn't sound all bad to me. Wouldn't have sounded all bad to younger me. Obviously not anymore, pillar of the community and all that. But
Yeah, but it's not mind altering because their mind is there. Like it's
yeah, that's true. Well, that ruined that.
everything.
Okay.
Everything gets boring eventually.
I'm hearing you
Surely?
say drugs are good.
I don't know.
This is what I see. He's going back. You're not embarrassing me anymore now. But you're back to normal. I'm much happier. But so yeah, do people like is there an extreme synesthete? Do they hang out and go, oh my god, this is amazing? Or it just really is just it's 100% normal, so whatever. Or is it not until they compare themselves to people who don't have it that they think harder about it?
Yeah, so it's not uncommon to have not thought about it a lot and to only hear about it in a psych lecture or something like that and be like, wow, I didn't realise I was different. Some individuals, might report something to their parents and their parents start to cotton on that this is something unusual. But again, I think the reaction can really differ depending perhaps on how much knowledge people have about this is the condition. Otherwise, it might sound a little bit concerning, or they might just think that the child is making something up. Whereas if people know what it is, they might have a little bit more understanding if their children start reporting, oh yeah, that sounds really blue.
So what's the best bits? Like, what do you like best? Do you still do a lot of research on, or have you diversified into other realms? Or?
So my research is quite broad, but I always have an ongoing interest in synesthesia. I think it's particularly fascinating as a topic because it really highlights how diverse and different our experiences can be in response to the identical stimulus in front of us.
Yeah.
Doesn't this get to this deep down question, do we all see the same colours? And quite clearly, synesthetes don't.
Well, we can never really answer that philosophical question of does my red...
Yeah.
Oh, that would be interesting. Whether my red looks like your red.
Well, it's all my red.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I own red. That's me.
I just learned a word. You're centering, man. You're making it all about you.
Again, yes. Man, you're the woke one today.
That'll wear off.
But if, say, you look at the letter A, to somebody it might just be, that's the letter A, there it is in black and white, whereas to somebody else they start experiencing the colour red. It's amazing how the same sort of physical reality can elicit such a different psychological reality for people. And I think
we can
that's why
still
it's so
connect and
fascinating.
communicate and work out anyway.
And sort of try to bumble forward.
And the
despite that.
answer to that question often is, does it matter? If we see red or the letter A or whatever it is, and we experience it in our brain in very, very different ways, or through our eyes in very different ways. But if we can communicate across that, then
if we have enough consistency, at least to share some of that experience.
Or at least we think we do, and that's the same thing.
Yeah. Exactly.
So how can the CIA or ASIA weaponise this?
I really haven't thought about that implication.
I know you have to answer that way, but no one's listening. What do you think?
It would be really hard to weaponise.
That's what I'm wondering.
You can't trigger this in people, can you? You can't.
Not really. It seems to be there or not. As you said, there are some mind-altering substances that some people report briefly eliciting some synesthetic experience.
People can't do some really good yoga and build their brain to become more synesthete?
No.
Oh.
I wonder if it is an evolutionary
Sorry, listener. I hate to disappoint you.
Sorry to be the bearer of bad news.
So we can't weaponise it. It is cool, though. Is it related to other remarkable or noteworthy qualities that are less normal or obvious in the brain? Like, do you find most synesthetes also hate wearing shoes or are very tall or whatever it may be?
So synesthetes do tend to be more creative, so they're more likely to be artists or writers or musicians than the general population. And I guess this makes a little bit of sense, or partly for directly those who are using their synesthetic experience in an artistic way, but even more generally, so synesthetes seem to have these broader, more diffuse connections. They see perhaps connections between things cognitively that a non-synesthete might not see. And if you think about something like writing poetry, if you want to write in metaphors and similes, if you can sort of see the striking resemblance between things or connections between things that mightn't be immediately apparent to others, that's going to be quite a useful attribute.
You can understand that in a multiple, in the sort of generic, that person sees the world in different ways. That's clear what a synesthete does, and that's often applied rhetorically to an artist or a poet or a musician. So, but then you add in the neuroscience way of thinking about it, saying they do have different connections in their brain, a non-typical way of connecting up the brain. So you can understand that flow of ideas. That why wouldn't they be more likely to be artists and creative in that way?
But what about links to depression or extreme optimism or anything like that? Is there any kind of pattern?
Extreme optimism?
Who knows?
You say it like that's a problem.
I didn't mean it that way.
You have extreme optimism.
Yeah, I'm very worried about you. You think everything's just peachy, you idiot.
I'm down in the extreme optimism camp.
No, your wife describes you as dum-de-dum-de-dum like Winnie the Pooh. I don't know if that's optimism or obliviousness, but it's a bit of both.
It can be both.
It's true.
And what's the problem? Winnie the Pooh has a nice life.
He really does.
He's got a pot of honey and he wears underpants.
He doesn't wear underpants. He just wears a top.
He wears a shirt, but no
he's
underpants.
Donald Duck.
That's right.
You're the dude without pants. Sorry, we're back to the question.
Interesting tangent.
Yeah. Well, but so are there associations of behaviour, personality, attitudinal stuff, as well as creativity?
Nothing that's been sort of systematically and reliably shown. There sometimes looks like a little bit of evidence that certain personality features, but hasn't been replicated. So at the moment, we just sort of say.
So you've got
no
plenty
to
of
the
work to
answer
do
that.
still.
Absolutely.
Well, speaking of plenty of work, what are the frontiers? I mean, you don't tell us the secret peer-reviewed CIA research. Or
No,
anything
we'll
like
just
non-peer-
push pause and you can.
But what are the directions in synesthesia research?
Yeah, it's a really interesting avenue. So a lot of the sort of more perceptual and sensory aspects have been quite well studied, and so probably the zeitgeist at the moment is more looking at some of those cognitive attributes that go along with being a synesthete. So aside from the sensory experience that you have, how do you perform on some of our more standard cognitive tasks that measure different aspects of psychological processing? And there's been some sort of interesting differences there emerging, and I think that's really sort of where people are focusing.
It's like memory tasks or something like that, or multiple.
So synesthetes perform better on memory tasks, at least on one particular task. They're less susceptible to false memories, where people experience.
Really?
Oh,
Yes.
so they're great witnesses.
That might
We
be
should
the
put a synesthete
implication.
on every corner. Like if there's a crime about to happen,
Stand still. This is a synesthete's box.
And there was like a car crash, and they're like, it was a blue car crash, not blue car.
Smell
but
like cheese. Definitely cheese.
the cheesy car crash.
Cheese car. I know. I'd know.
I got some burgers. It was American cheese. It was.
Ooh, someone's phone went ping. What an exciting time. So we can turn them into expert witnesses. That's great. So we find that we
Potentially. So far it's only been shown in a laboratory task, and this was with word stimuli. So one of the arguments might be from that they could have been using their synesthetic experience in quite a strategic way.
Yeah.
So people often fall prey to sort of certain illusions that they think that a word that was semantically related to ones that was presented, even though it wasn't.
Right.
Whereas for a synesthete, they might be like, hang on, I didn't experience orange, and that word's orange.
Yeah.
So they can sort of process things more
their
analytically
memory,
like
so
that.
their memory can work in different ways of an event.
Well, initially it was thought that they might have superior memory capacity, but now it looks like they might just be using their synesthetic experience more strategically.
Well, emotions are easy to remember, and smells are associated with emotions and all that.
Well, they've got more
so-
tabs in their filing system.
Yeah, so in that sense it mightn't be sort of
That's a good
more
metaphor.
Yeah.
raw
Good
capacity,
metaphor.
but as you said, sort of more cues that they can use.
Yeah. So they get extra elements. They
Yeah.
get a multi-dimensional array, and we only get like a couple. Oh, I got a PhD, man.
Not. I'm sure, listener. Many of you are experiencing the Wholesome Show
Which is
in
green.
some sort of colour.
Yeah.
Well, what colour is listener? If you're a synesthete, can you tell us what the Wholesome Show colour is, or the
taste or
flavour?
smell?
If it makes it salty, beery, oniony, prawny. Are we prawns?
We're lavender. Are we prawns? I ask myself that every day. Are we prawns? I don't know what to do.
But let us know, listener. I'm very keen to know what the Wholesome Show experience is in terms of colour or taste or whatever.
Me too. I got a sort of a final question then. Has this research, are there a lot of people in the field? Does it take you around the world? Are you writing books? When's the documentary come out? What's the...
Yes, we'll be adapting it into a film
Fantastic.
in I'm kidding.
Russell Crowe.
Blue
Russell
is the
Crowe
sound of salty.
wearing his loin goiter.
There's a few sort of laboratories around the world that focus on synesthesia, but I wouldn't say it's the most widely studied topic. It's sort of a few key labs that have really made it their focus.
And you're going to run one? Do you
Yeah.
already run one? Surely. The ANU Synesthesia Monster Lab, that's the go. Or are you getting tired of it? Do you want to move on? Do you want to move to something else?
Oh, I don't think I'll ever tire of synesthesia. I'm a cognitive psychologist more broadly, so I'm
Yeah.
just really interested in human experience and perceptual performance, and so I look at that in quite a number of ways, and synesthesia is just one way that I do that.
I think it's cool as hell. Like, I really do, this sort of stuff. I mean, I did psych 100 years ago, and I didn't stick with it because I got mad with some people, but it's not psych's fault, it's mine. I recognise that.
You got some mad with some people. What?
I got mad.
I was going to say what colour are those people, but let's not do that. Let's not do no.
Black like my heart.
No, as in, don't do that. I said, don't do that.
Oh, I get the words confused.
No, don't.
Don't has do in it.
Don't add the.
You can't have don't without do.
We're not even going to edit that out in post. But listener, I'm sorry. He didn't mean it in that way. He meant it in a different way.
No, I mean angry, not crazy. Have I made it better yet?
No, you haven't.
I'm trying to fix it. I'm very bad at fixing things. I'm not
Digging
that
the
kind of
hole.
doctor.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, you're stuck in the hole. But let's say
Everyone knows if you're in a hole, keep digging.
maybe the end of the Wholesome Show should come with a generic apology. An actual apology, but
Thanks
but
for
generic.
joining us, and we're sorry. That's been fantastic. Thank you very much, Stephen. We could
Thank
keep
you.
talking, or at least I could, but it sounds like maybe I shouldn't. So we need to thank some people. Will, tell me who.
Well, first of all, the Wholesome Show is brought to you by the Australian National Centre for the Public Awareness of Science.
Yes, not pubic awareness, as
So
my
that
signature block said for a long time.
You should have changed that.
I did.
But you can get all of your science communication needs,
Oh, yes.
undergrad, PhD, research, all the other stuff, all that good business.
You can. And also the Wig and Pen Fantastic Beer Emporium for the best beers in the southern half of the known universe.
Also, thanks to our intern Greg. We're not calling him an intern.
Keith, Gary, Nick.
He's a Nick, but you know his mum calls him Greg for some reason.
She's synesthetic, but not in the way that you
this
identified.
shit is out there on YouTube now as well. I can't believe they put a podcast on YouTube. That's
Yeah,
What
if you
the,
want to be
what
entertained,
the hell?
you can watch us do this as well.
Yeah, exactly. You can pretend to drink the beer. Anyway, we'll be back next week, listener. Love you all.
Next week. Yeah, I forgot to write anything down.
What?
I was talking.
What?
I just think it's so interesting.